What to do with the whole packer brisket? A whole packer brisket is the brisket, the whole brisket, and nothing but the brisket. It is straight out of processing and has not been trimmed or anything. So this is my 19-pound whole packer brisket, and I'm going to show you how I trim my briskets, turn the fat into beef tallow, and use the flat and other trimmings for burger meat. So the first step I take is with my fillet knife, and I just start cutting away at the fat cap. That's what this side is. I'm not looking to remove the fat cap, just simply make it a little smaller and more consistent thickness across the whole cap. And then this thing right here is called the kernel. It's a real hard fat that I don't want, so I'll go ahead and get rid of that. And now I'm going to remove the flat. That's this thing right here. I like to do this with a cleaver or a sharp chef's knife, and I've got a scale off to the side here. I want to keep track of how much weight I'm removing so I can subtract it from the original size of the brisket and get a good idea of how long I need to smoke my brisket. I think what I'm trying to communicate here is I just removed 4.8 pounds. Now it's time to get back to the fillet knife and clean this sucker up. I don't like to leave any rough corners because those cook goofy. And I look for any weird processing defects that can be removed. And then this next step is something, if you've been around the channel for a while, you already know I swear by. I'm going to dry brine my brisket. That is coating heavily in kosher salt and letting stand in open air on a baking sheet with a cooling rack to have 360 degree airflow in the refrigerator for 24 hours. Then at the 24-hour mark, I add my additional seasonings and wrap in plastic wrap. Please feel free to get creative with this step, but remember, you have already added salt, so store-bought rubs might make your brisket too salty. I am making this brisket for a taco bar, so I am choosing to keep it simple since there will be other taco toppings. And I am just adding garlic powder and black pepper. I do apologize for not having that footage. So it will remain in the plastic wrap for 12 hours, in the fridge for 9, and then it gets put out on the counter for 3 hours at room temperature to begin acclimating. This is another step that I swear by for almost all cuts of meat. This helps bring the temperature up a bit so that you don't shock the moisture out of it when it gets placed on the smoker. Now let's get back to those trimmings. Now this footage right here is before the steps I just told you about. The brisket is currently just in the fridge dry brining and not yet wrapped. But I am going to go through all of my trimmings, cutting away the rest of the fat and separating the fat from the meat. You don't want any meat in your fat for turning into tallow. The meat from the flat and the trimmings goes into another bowl, cut into pieces that fit into my meat grinder. And when separated and sized properly, weigh both the fat and the meat and subtract the weights from the original brisket. This will let you know how to plan your cook. I go for 90 minutes per pound at 225 degrees, wrapping when it hits 160 degrees internal, and then pulling it off of the smoker at 203 degrees. Now that we got that out of the way, put the fat and the meat into the freezer for 10, maybe 15, possibly 20 minutes just to harden up a bit. This will be best for the fat so that it does not begin to render in the grind from friction. And with the meat, it will help to retain moisture for better burgers. So when you have everything ready, get your grinder set up with the coarse grinder end, and I'm going to start with my fat. Just run that fat through and catch it in an aluminum tray. Place it on your smoker or stove or oven, covered, that part's important, and cook on low for a couple of hours until everything renders down into fat. After that, filter with a strainer or a cloth and refrigerate. Use it in place of any oil or butter anytime you cook. Now let's get to those burgers. I like mixing my brisket burgers at 80-20, 80% brisket, 20% bacon. So I have 4 pounds, 14 ounces of brisket. So I need 1 pound and 4 ounces of bacon. I cut the bacon up into manageable pieces, and then suddenly it's time to grind. Place in several pieces of brisket and then some bacon, and just keeping between the two kind of evenly. And I highly recommend any time that you're combining two different meats that you do a twice grind to get a consistent mixture. The next step is storage. I have just under 6 pounds of brisket bacon burger meat, and I'm going to freeze it in 1 pound increments with my vacuum sucker and just use it as needed. This is how the brisket came out this year. I estimated an 18-hour cook, and it took 18 hours and 12 minutes, so that's a win. It was a 12-pounder. I gave it a 3-hour rest in a clean cooler that I primed with hot water, and we made tacos out of it. I served it with coleslaw and corn salsa. I made up some quick pickled onions and homemade avocado crema and smoked red salsa. It was so good and super fun. I appreciate you for watching. I hope to see you back here next week, but until then, be well. Smells amazing. Oh my goodness. Alright, now to 203.